Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and The Daily Critique. Today's image was submitted by Chandravir, who's an intermediate photographer from India. This is the holy river Narmada in India, and Chandravir says that this shot was taken in the evening. There was quite a bit of haze, and it's visible in the light of the setting sun here. This image was created with a crop factor camera and effective focal length of around 150 millimeters and exposed at f10 for 1/200th of a second. Let's get right into the critique today. One of the things that I love about the image is the real simple graphic design, framing the river with both of the banks on the sides and creating this real strong feeling of leading line through the image and a real classical quality of leading line and S-curve. I'm really enjoying that about the image. Really lets me know where to look. My favorite thing about this composition is Chandravir's inclusion of the steps leading up to what looks like a viewing platform. It's a real classical sort of element of design that's being played out here. You see it quite a bit in cinema, and it's a real neat sort of photographic construction to think about, and that's the idea of juxtaposing natural subjects with things that are man-made. The steps leading up to and then the viewing platform really add a whole nother level of story to the image, and I just love the fact that it's very far over on the right. You have this real small subject, but because it's man-made and it's very different, and also because it gives us a chance to imagine ourselves in the image, and it also gives all of this a sense of scale, this really ends up having a powerful impact on me as the viewer. And when I'm creating my own photographs, I'm constantly thinking about ways that I can add what I call multiple layers of story in the image that either give the viewer a chance to feel like they can physically move into the image or psychologically move into the image. Once we can get people sort of inside of the image and get them to forget about the fact that they're just looking at a two-dimensional artifact, we can really get people's attention and then hold it for quite a long time. And I just love what this is doing in the image in terms of adding another very powerful layer of story. I think the conversion here to sepia monochrome is really interesting too. I think it's a good choice. Chandravir mentions this sort of being hazy flat light, and if I'm shooting a big landscape like this in flat light, a lot of times I will start to think about monochrome. Where I can maybe push the idea of contrast further than I might be able to get away with if we were working in color. When I start to think about perfect world improvement for this image, I question the negative space up here in the image. There's so much movement in the image, and there's so much contrast. There's all these textures, and this is very powerful. And then all of a sudden we run out of all this texture and all this information, and we get to a flat negative space shape of the sky. And for my taste, I would either want to cut down on this by cropping down and only including a little bit of it, so we could look at that first. So let's just go ahead and do a crop, come down to somewhere like this, see what we think. And there's before and there's after, and I do like this crop a lot better. For me, it gives the chance for the trees that are up on top to be a sort of another layer of information where there's some texture, and the negative space at the top now feels a little bit more balanced with the river in terms of having areas that are bright in the image, and the negative space is small enough now where the trees can break it up and give it sort of a sense of being dynamic in terms of an overall space shape. It also, for my eye and my taste, lets this as a powerful subject in the image come forward even more. But one of the things that I wanted to say in the critique today is that it's so tempting to go up and get the top of the room, is sort of one way to say it, and that's one way that I think about it. Whether you're shooting a landscape, let's say you're shooting a waterfall, say you're shooting an architectural interior, or even shooting an architectural exterior, it can be so tempting to feel like we have to sort of finish the idea. I think a lot of times it's more powerful to not show the top of the room, to let the viewer imagine what's up there, but to make a cut in our image before we get to the top. Not only does it sort of leave some things to the imagination of the viewer, but the top of the room, whether it's a landscape or whether it's an architectural subject, so much of the time there's an enormous amount of contrast at the top of the frame, the top of the frame is already visually heavier than the bottom of the frame, just because of the idea of gravity, and also because of the idea that we want to start at the top when we're looking at a page. And when we go up and we get the top of the room, we already have the top being heavy. We have a lot of contrast. So much of the time we do have a change in subject matter to negative space. A lot of times it can be flat. Top of the image can be overwhelming. And I could see making a case for a crop where we come all the way down to right here. We actually just have the steps in the image in that top right corner. And from here, just copy the background and do a little bit of Photoshop work real quick. I could see playing around with local contrast to bring the steps out and to make the eye move a little bit more with contrast. I'm just going to do this in a rough way for the sake of time. I'm just going to go to levels and make a big overcorrection. Just do some serious compression here in terms of a white point and a black point. And I'm going to go back to layers. I'm going to fill the mask with black by doing a Command Delete on a Mac or Control Delete on a PC. I'm going to change the blending mode to this layer to luminosity so that we're not affecting color, we're just affecting value. I'm going to hit B for the brush key. Whenever I'm working on a mask, I always have the hardness of the brush set to 0, and I just use the different brush sizes to make more specific brush strokes. And again, I'm just doing this in a quick, rough way, but I'm going to use an opacity on the brush of around 20%. And I could come in, I could pop the steps there, make it even more dramatic. I could pop this area as sort of a very small top of the room that's getting brighter back in here, but have that shape mimic the movement of line that's in the river, so that we draw our eye up to the top and we play these two ideas off of each other, but in more of a subtle way than having that really bright negative space. And then I think to hold the eye down in here, you could come in and play around with the idea of more local contrast. In some of these areas where you already have a hint of contrast, you could pop that out. Make this rock brighter, make this one brighter, make the tops of these rocks that are catching that skylight a little bit brighter, create a little bit more local movement that will slow the eye down in here. And you get sort of the idea of what I'm talking about here. I've done it rough. It's not exactly what I might do if I was working on the image and taking my time. I'm going to pop this out even more, and so here's what we just did with those changes from a local contrast standpoint. And I'd love to hear your feedback and what you think about both crops on the image. Let's just go back to Chandraveer's original image, and I like it quite a bit. It's an amazing location. Really love the leading quality of line, and just really love what Chandraveer has done with this as a subject matter to create a whole nother layer and level of story. I want to say a big thank you to Chandraveer for sharing this beautiful landscape image with us, and hope to see you again real soon on the Mindful Eyes Daily Critique.